All right, we are live. The Monday morning edition of Coffee with Rich. My good friend Dr. TC Fuller is on with me this morning. Good morning, TC.
Morning, Rich. How are you today?
I'm living the dream up here on the plateau, man. I tell you what, there's some terrible floods not too far from us, but we are completely unaffected, thank God.
Well, that's good. Yeah, there's been flooding pretty badly up in North Carolina, but it hadn't been a problem here.
Oh, thank God. While we're waiting, it looks like two folks have jumped on so far. More are jumping on as we speak. I got Will out there in Montana, coin number 800. Will, I wish I was up there with you this morning. I bet it's a beautiful Montana morning. Tony is on from Brunswick, Georgia. Please hit that share button, like and share all you can, because I'm going to be speaking with Dr. T.C. Fuller, one of my all-time favorite guests. We're going to talk about his time in Afghanistan, what's going on there currently, and what is the road ahead for our great nation. So let me go ahead and do some sponsor reads, Dr. Fuller. Let's pay for this show. What do you say? The first sponsor I want to talk about is the American Warrior Society. My name is Rich Brown. I'm the co-founder of the American Warrior Society and the American Warrior Show, America's #1 self-defense podcast. And if you have any concerns about your personal safety, your personal self-defense, please check out AmericanWarriorSociety.com and find out if becoming a member of our self-defense community is the right thing for you and your family. We also have one of our sponsors is Century Martial Arts, makers of the Bob XL. Bob XL Body Opponent Bag. XL gives you a great thigh level striking surface for leg kicks. Bob is a great three-dimensional target. You can take Bob to the range and shoot him. Bob is an amazing striking opponent. You're definitely going to want to pick one up today. All of our sponsors for today's Coffee with Rich can be found at the AmericanWarriorShow.com. And on the right-hand side of the page, you have links to all of our amazing sponsors, as well as discount codes that'll take you right in there and get you taken care of. We also have sponsors like the Cool Fire Trainer. Right now, Cool Fire Trainers, man, they are on back order, TC. Like, I think they're 2 months out from meeting their production goals. Yeah, with the ammo crisis of last year and this year, people have just been cool firing their faces off, taking that dry fire to the next level with the Cool Fire Trainer, because it's your gun, it's your trigger, your sights, your grip panels, everything. It is your gun. All you got to do is replace the barrel and the recoil spring, and you're going to take that dry fire to the next level. We also have Mountain Man Medical. The AWS and Mountain Man Medical co-branded trauma kit is available for purchase. I have a link in today's show notes. I think it's like $139. It's got everything you need for the traumas in your life. Pick one up, get one for your loved ones, put one in your car. They're definitely a good piece of kit. We also have Precision Holsters, makers of the belt that I'm wearing currently, the tactical belt. It's an amazing tactical belt, the only one that I wear. Mike Seeklander wears as well. They also have a competition line of holsters, which are phenomenal, as well as the Ultra Appendix holster that Mike and I both wear. Last but not least, APPHemp.com. It's AppalachianStandard.com. CBD salves are amazing. And I'll give you a quick thing. My wife goes, you can even talk about this on the show. So I'm going to talk about it. TC, you asked me this morning how my wife is. She recently had back surgery. She's been getting a lot of pain in her hips. So I've been rubbing some of that CBD salve on her hips, and it has been really helping with the pain. They have tincture, which you put a couple of drops underneath your tongue. You're going to sleep better, and your joints are going to feel better for it. We've got 21 folks joining us live, TC. Let's see who's on the show. Then I'll read TC's amazing bio, and we'll get into it. Gerald is on, coin number 952 out there in Oregon. Chris is on, says good morning from Lakeland, Florida. John is out there in Yukon, Oklahoma, coin number 1919. If you want to find out what a coin number is, please check out AmericanWarriorSociety.com. Oscar is on from Elgin, Texas. Mark Hamilton up there in beautiful Canada. Linda is on from Texas. Let's see who else we have here. Walt is on, says good morning. Rich and TC, coin number 138 from Ohio. I'll have to catch the replay since I'm driving today. Have a great day, everyone. Troy is on from Indiana. Dave Frazier. Ed is on, says good morning, Rich and TC, coin number 2062. Margie is on. Joseph is on. My brother Jeff Brown is on. James is on from West Virginia. Please like and hit that share button. I'm going to read Dr. TC Fuller's amazing bio, and then we'll get into today's show, which is going to be specific to the crisis in Afghanistan. T.C. Fuller is an experienced federal investigator and firearms trainer. He has spent his life carrying a firearm for the United States government. T.C. first served as an Army Infantry officer, explosive ordnance disposal officer before leaving the Army to accept an appointment as a special agent for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He spent the next 20 years working in all areas of investigative interest within the FBI and served for several years as an instructor at the FBI's Firearms Training Unit in Quantico, Virginia. TC holds a Bachelor of Science in Criminology, as well as a Master of Education in Interdisciplinary Studies and a Doctorate in Education Leadership and Policy Studies. As a published writer, TC has written an innovative book on the topic of improving law enforcement deadly force training, as well as having written for several print magazines on the areas of law enforcement procedure, explosives, firearms, and edged weapons. Among TC's personal achievements, he has been awarded the U.S. Army's highest peacetime award for heroism, the Soldier's Medal. Besides finding, capturing, and convicting a fugitive on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list, TC has also been successful competitive shooter for more than 20 years, earning a masterclass certification from the International Defensive Pistol Association, winning numerous local, state, and regional competitions along the way. He now operates his company, the Horus Group, LLC, which serves as a consultancy on firearms and training, as well as providing high-end private firearms training for both armed professionals and citizens. Got 21 folks. Sounds like I've got a little bit of bleed back
Sorry about
there.
that.
Okay, no worries. Okay, Dr. Fuller, good morning and welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you, Rich. Always a pleasure to be here. Always flattering. Matter of fact, it's getting more and more flattering every time you come back. You have me back because of the quality of your guests continue to rise and rise. I just kind of stay the same. So I'm humbled to be here in that company.
Well, it's a blessing. Tony says, up late last night reading Dr. Fuller's book. And yeah, Dr. Fuller, tell us about your book real quick before we get into today's show.
Well, it's called Reasonable, Justified, and Necessary. I wrote it under a nom de plume because I was still an active agent. I want to apologize up front about the glare on my glasses. I took something in the eye the other day on the range and can't wear my contacts for a few days. So, so the book is about improving the way we train law enforcement specifically in the administration of deadly force. I think that a lot of the lessons in there, a lot of things I discuss in there are absolutely applicable to the civilian concealed carry person with some obvious exceptions. But that's what the book is about. It's about, doing a better job of taking the information we have now and the information we've gleaned in some cases in a very, difficult and final fashion over the years and applying it to actual firearms training, getting away from qualifications and moving on, so a lot of agencies, I know a lot of your active law enforcement guys can relate to this is, your firearms training constitutes going out to a square range, known distance targets on a nice day when it's sunny and you've had a good meal. And nobody's going to hurt you or shoot you or kill you or question what you've done out here. And the targets turn and you shoot them and you go home and you shoot 100 and you think, wow, that's really cool. But that really doesn't have a whole lot to do with fighting with a gun. And so the book sort of addresses that issue.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Dave Brothers is on. Jesse is on. Says, good morning, gentlemen. My beautiful bride, Miss Lisa, is on. Elke is on. He says, I can join 5 minutes late and still working his way through TC's bio. That's awesome. It's an impressive bio, no question about it. So, Dr. Fuller, we promised folks that we were going to talk about Afghanistan. So let's just jump right into it, man. Give us a little bit about the background of how we got to where we are now. How did we get into Afghanistan?
Well, what a mess, right? For a lot of your audiences, got enough gray in their hair to remember 9/11, remember where they were on 9/11. And of course, we figured out pretty quickly that the planning and a lot of the logistical support came out of and through Afghanistan and through the Taliban, who was the government of Afghanistan at the time. They had kind of emerged from the post-Soviet withdrawal civil war as the victors, and they had established an Islamic state right out of the 1400s in Afghanistan. So obviously we took umbrage to their support of the 9/11 attacks. And by October 7th, we started the bombing campaign. We had special forces units on the ground, recruiting and beginning to train up and work with the pre-existing Afghan fighters, the anti-Taliban fighters. The Northern Alliance was the big dog in that fight. Ahmad Shah Massoud was the big leader of that organization. Very, very popular guy, the Lion of Panjshir. But he was assassinated 2 days before the 9/11 attacks. So there was a real power vacuum there. But anyhow, we moved in.
It's a brilliant chess move, by the way.
Oh, it was. And if you recall the details of the assassination, yeah. They got two guys to pose as reporters to go in and do an interview with him. And they got in there and they had a firearm concealed in a weapon concealed in a camera. And that's what they used to kill him. Interestingly enough, his son is now one of the leading anti-Taliban commanders on the ground in Afghanistan now. He's carrying the torch forward for his father. Anyhow, that's why we got in there. We knocked over the Taliban leadership very, very quickly. By December, we were putting in a new government. There was a meeting up in Germany between a lot of the leadership from various factions. By the middle of the next year, you had Hamid Karzai had been put in as the interim president. He ended up serving for, I want to say 13 years as the actual president. Survived a whole slew of assassination attempts when I was there. I remember him, flying in a CH-47 and somebody took a shot at him with a RPG. But that just happened to him all the time. Anyhow, 20 years later, we've, gotten to a point where we've pulled most of our troops out. Our previous administration entered into talks with the Taliban and had agreed to certain conditions on which we would leave, including a timeline, but also including, the Taliban agreeing to certain behaviors, which they largely ignored. But nonetheless, we still continue to draw down from 14,000 troops. 2 years ago, we were down to 2,500 troops when all this shenanigans started. And just in the last month, obviously, things have really gone off the rails.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Given what we're seeing now, how did we get to this debacle? What's going on in the last couple of months that led to this?
I'm sure there are several of your viewers that served over there and understand, like any of us that were over there, this isn't a surprise, right? That the Afghan National Army just folded up like a cheap suit. It's not surprising to anybody. What might be a little surprising is just exactly how fast they threw down their weapons and ran away. I think part of it lies in the fact that we put up a timeline. Right? From your time in the military, your viewers that have served know that one of the most difficult military maneuvers to pull off is a retrograde action while in contact, right? Breaking contact and getting out. I was talking to a lady at a birthday party yesterday, and she just didn't understand how that worked. I said, well, imagine, and she's holding her 3-year-old on her lap. I said, imagine you're trying to leave the house without your 3-year-old knowing it. Okay. Now that's difficult enough. Now imagine your 3-year-old is 6 feet tall, armed with a machete, and is trying to kill you, and you want to leave the house without him knowing it. It becomes very, very difficult to do that. Now make that a nation-sized problem. And that's where you're running into trying to leave. So giving your enemy, in that set of circumstances, any information on what you're doing and how you're doing it, it can be bad. Telling them straight up, look, we're going to leave by May 1st, which was what the original agreement was. May 1st, 2021, we're gone. And they're already not abiding by the agreement on their side. They're continuing to attack. They're continuing to make the problem. Should tell you, hey, look, this isn't going to work, right? You're not negotiating in good faith. You're not comporting yourself as you should be vis-a-vis our agreement. So therefore, our agreement is null and void. But instead, what they've done is every time we've stutter stepped on the agreement, they lose their minds. Oh my God, you're not obeying the agreement, and any blood from here on out is on your hands. Meanwhile, they're out killing people and shooting people and stoning people and doing whatever they really want to do.
Well, let me ask you this: was this outcome a foregone conclusion?
As soon as when you say everybody from the West is leaving and the Afghans are going to fight with the Taliban, I think so. I think it was kind of a foregone conclusion. If you're not there to provide that backbone, the Afghan National Army, the Afghans on their own are just not going to be able to stand up to the Taliban because the Taliban is not fighting on its own, right? The Taliban is not don't make the mistake of thinking the Taliban is solely composed of Afghans. It's not. Don't make the mistake of thinking that they are not receiving outside arms, money, advisors, and soldiers, troops from all over the world. It's still a big deal if you were of the Islamic extremist bent to kill Americans, right? To come over any place and kill Americans. That's a big deal. I was served as an interrogator in Guantanamo Bay before I went to Afghanistan. And I remember distinctly talking to a guy who had been fighting since he was fighting the Russians. Then he fought for the Taliban and he fought us. And he told me, he said, look, if you let me go, I'm going to kill Americans. If you let me out of here, I'm going to kill them. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and kill as many Americans as I can before Allah takes me home. And I was like, well, I guess you're just going to sit there chained to that chair and I'm not going to let you go. But that's sort of a mindset that we just don't have, right? We just don't have that mindset. And that's what the Taliban is. And the Afghans, to see it from their perspective, the Afghan National Army, the Americans and everybody else are leaving. They got to live there. And they have a national habit, probably not a good enough word, but of, working for money, right? Loyalties shift in that country very, very quickly. And just because I told you I would do something doesn't necessarily mean I'm actually going to do it. Matter of fact, I get a lot of approbation just for having said I'm going to do it. Like Gaddafi, when he said, if you cross the line of death, into the Bay of Benghazi, we will kill you. I kill you. To the Arab world, that read as he actually did kill people. He didn't actually do it. And of course, we crossed the line and smacked him. Not that Afghanistan is Arab, but it's that same sort of mindset. Saying it is as good as doing it, so you don't actually have to do it. So these guys shifting allegiances is a national pastime. Add to that the fact that now they've got to live there, right? We're leaving. They got to stay there. They being the ANA, the Afghan National Army fellows. They've got to figure out a way to live, right? So the idea that, hey, they read the writing on the wall and shift allegiances quickly, I kind of get it. I mean, I don't like it, but I kind of get it. We have the luxury of fighting with our families 8,000 miles away.
Yeah.
These guys don't. They don't have that luxury. And the Taliban doesn't hesitate to say, you know what, you screwed up, so we're going to kill you and your wife and your daughters and your sons and people who owe you money and your dog. And, so they don't have sort of the restraint, and they don't have the difficulty getting at people's families. One of your readers just said you would call that whims. Through our lens, it is whims. Yeah. One of the viewers just mentioned it. I think it is a whim through our lens, but through their lens, it's survival. And please, I'm trying to make excuses, but I'm just trying to cast a light on this.
And let's talk about, again, going back to and having an informed opinion. Everybody in America and around the world has an opinion about what's going on right now. And I think that the reason I asked you yesterday to we cobbled this show together quickly over the last 12 hours, was your opinion matters. And, you have set and I would imagine in a cell or some kind of a holding place in Guantanamo and breathe the same air with these terrorists. And you've, humped the hills of Afghanistan, rooting them out with some elite units. So I think that your opinion, and being a very learned man with many leather-bound books behind you, I really do appreciate your opinion. So tell the viewers, TC, your role in the GWAT, the Global War on Terror, as it relates to Afghanistan, et cetera, please.
Okay. So obviously 9/11 happens. I'm actually at work that day, watched the towers fall, like everybody did. And everybody, of course, you remember how angry everyone was. We all just wanted a piece of somebody's ass. So I got an opportunity to go to Guantanamo Bay as an interrogator. They needed people down there, so off I went. Under those circumstances, your country calls, and mind you, I'd only been out of the Army a few years at that point. Your country calls, you go, right? So I went, and it was interesting because there were interrogators there that had been military trained. There were interrogators there who had been trained by the CIA. And then there was a batch of us, not a ton of us, but there was a steady flow of us coming through. And the differing approaches to interrogation and goals is really kind of interesting to watch from a professional standpoint. Military interrogators are trained very, very well to get that tactical intelligence, right? I need to know, is there a machine gun around that corner? What unit is running the artillery show back in the RAG, in the regimental artillery group? Who's back there? They're very good at getting that information. But they have zero training on, I need to follow the money train, right? I need to follow your finances and I need to take them apart. I need to know everything about your finances, where the money started from and how it got to these people that were flying these planes. I need to know, who did your identification. I need to know all your logistics support. That's really not a military thing. And so you had interrogators down there trying to do that, but not with a whole lot of training experience and knowledge on that. I'm not taking a shot at anybody. It's just it's just a difference in approach, a different mindset. And so we kind of went down there. I went down there, and of course, the first question I asked is, what is my legal right to do this? I mean, what is my legal basis to have these conversations? So we hashed all that out, and I got into the rooms and started talking to people.
And when you say you went down there, we're talking specifically about Guantanamo Bay at this point, right?
We are, yeah.
Okay.
So I spent quite a bit of time down there, and did the interrogation thing, did some training from, actually got to train some Marines on handguns, and they went ahead and they let us shoot the Mark 19, which by my way of thinking was a very fair trade. Because the Mark 19 was just coming online when I got out of the military. Anyhow, so a year later, they give me a call and say, hey, look, we'd like you to go to Afghanistan and do some of what you were doing before, but also some other stuff. So, okay, pack it up and go. But it was such an undeveloped theater at the time that the Bureau said, because I started asking, having been in combat already, I was asking questions, okay, weaponry, armor, water, backpacks, all that crap that you got to have. And they were the Bureau was pretty much like, well, we're going to buy you some stuff from REI and, bring, what killed me was they said, bring Big Blue. Now, any of your old FBI agent viewers will know what Big Blue was. It's a big ballistic vest, but, it's got big FBI letters on it in yellow and it's blue. It's incredibly inappropriate for a desert warfare environment. So I said, okay. The good news for me, though, at the time was I was writing a lot for gun magazines and going to a lot of trade shows and everything. So I knew a lot of people in the industry. So I was able to make phone calls and kind of jump the line and get stuff because I only had a week between when they called me and when I departed. So I was able to get the gear that I thought I needed. And then I went over, got on the ground. And generally what we were doing was there weren't that many of us there. At any given moment, there might be 5 of us in country, 5 FBI agents in country, 6 plus a boss. So what we would do is we would get assigned to units that were going out. So let's say a Marine Corps unit was going to go out, a Marine Corps company was going to go out and patrol through a valley, and they were going to try and grab this medium value target, MVT, in this one particular village. So we'd jump in with them and, go hump out there with the Marines for 2 or 3 days. After that hit was over, you get flown back with any prisoners and any intel. And maybe the next day, a special forces unit needs you. So you fly down to Kandahar, you jump on a C5, you zip down to Kandahar from Bagram, and bang, you're out with them. You run around with them for a couple of days, then jump back in a bird, you fly up back to Bagram, get on the ring flights, and it's like a bus, a CH-47 bus, and you zip around up to Asadabad or Jalalabad, and you jump out with some other unit, and you run around with them for a day or two. So you end up seeing the whole country. Didn't really bond with any units for any length of time, but, ended up running around with a lot of people. And it was funny because in my head, the people that you just really didn't want to monkey with were the Reserve Special Forces units, because they were all like 45-year-old dudes. They were angry, and all they wanted to do was kill people and break shit. That's all they wanted to do. And the Marines, because the Marines were just like, look, it's in front of me. I'm a Claymore mine, right? Screw you. You're going to die. So really you had to rein those guys in pretty hard, because if you slip the leash on a Marine unit, they just went out and just destroyed everything. A lot like they do in bars, frankly, just larger and with more firearms. But it was a very educational and very busy time, because a typical military unit in that time frame there might, if they were out in a fire base, they would, do some patrols and whatnot, but it wasn't every day, right? You might go on a patrol today and not do another one for a few days or a week or whatever. For us, it was 4, 5, 6 days in a row, take a day. And that day was typically travel, and a few more days working and travel somewhere else. So it was pretty constant. It was pretty exhausting because you just went all the time. And of course, you're running around at 10, 12, 14,000 feet elevation, which, you run around with the young guys. They were all 18, 19-year-old hard dicks from the Marines and the Army and the Ranger Bats. And then there was, my 35-year-old ass dragging up and down these mountains. Just not a good combination right there. So while I was there, the things that I did were interrogations, a lot of times right there on the battlefield. So we'd grab somebody and there'd still be bullets flying and I'd be talking to them, trying to get information out. Did searches, right? Because you take a Marine platoon and you send them into a compound and you say, look, I need prisoners and I need paperwork. And I think I've had this conversation with you before, Rich. And that's what they'll do. They'll come out with a laundry bag full of paper, and they'll come out with 2 badly beaten dudes, right? And everybody else is going to be dead and the place is going to be on fire. Okay, that's what we pay them to do, right? That's what we train them and we pay them to do. But if I'm going to put a guy in Virginia in federal prison for being a terrorist, I need to know where this piece of paper came from, whose pocket it came out of, and what room it was in, who he was talking to. So all
the rules of evidence apply.
Right. And you had to establish that chain of evidence as early as possible. And we did. We also did DNA recovery. So hair, fiber, skin, blood, one case of femur. Yeah, that was. Yeah. If you'd have told me that I would be, drying pieces of body as part of my job description when I joined the FBI, I wouldn't have believed you. But that's sort of an overview of what I was doing over there. I know you have some viewer comments you probably want to get to here, so I'll shut my mouth.
Yeah. See, Greg is joining us. Thank you to the 30 folks that are joining us. Oscar asked, where can I find Dr. Fuller's book? I've got a link into today's show notes. You can click on that link and take you to the Horus group, and I'm imagining they can pick up a copy there. Greg is joining us from Texas. This is good morning all around. Coin number 2060. So I want to ask you this. You mentioned touring the entire country, riding on the CH-40s. Let's see who's on the show. Then let's discuss the billions of dollars of equipment that are left to the Taliban, Dr. Fuller. One of the things I saw was approximately 600,000 automatic weapons. Let me say that again. 600,000 at least automatic weapons, over 2,000 armored vehicles, 40 Black Hawk helicopters, and the list goes on and on. Could it have been much worse?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could have left a nuke. Yeah, we could have left a nuke, could have left a spare parts. My experience in that part of the world is those folks aren't real big on maintenance. They're not real big on, kind of what we would consider normal wear and tear and sort of mitigating that. So, yeah, those numbers are probably, I would guess, would be accurate, but we have to look at through the lens of we've been there 20 years. We've been arming the Afghan National Army for 20 years. And we left in such a rush that, we didn't crater the runway at Bagram. We didn't blow up the vehicles because let's face it, the vehicles, 1 minute they're being driven by the Afghan National Army or staged in their compounds, and the next they're handing the keys to the Taliban. They're doing it. What choice did we have, right? I mean, in the last 20 years, we could have been giving them AKs, I suppose. But if you're building a nation and you've got to build the military, you kind of have to give them the stuff. And we kind of, for whatever reason, believed that they would take care of the stuff and they wouldn't give it to the bad guys. And that was probably a mistake. Well, it's clearly a mistake to give. But I don't know what choice we really would have had to not give them the guns. Send them out there with slingshots. I mean, at least this time we didn't give them, Stinger missiles, right?
Thank God.
I don't know how much artillery we left them. I don't know how much of what is there, but I know it's a lot. I know we've spent a lot of time driving around the country blowing up old Russian stuff. that they were still using. I mean, they're still driving T-62s that the Russians left there in the 80s. You know, they're still rolling around those things. So, yeah, I think that, you know, giving them, you know, PEC 2s and night vision goggles was probably not the best idea. But again, what are you going to do? And they're going to make a lot of money selling the stuff. They're going to make, you know, they're going to arm themselves to the teeth. They're going to modernize all their own firearms and weaponry, and they're going to start selling it.
Yeah, that's a fact. Jay Land is on. Good morning. Jay says they will drive the equipment into the ground within weeks, and that is true. But again, it's like one of my jiu-jitsu partners the other day, we were training, and he was a former Marine, Garrett, you know who you are, and he's now works security at a special weapons site. Anyway, he says, you know what bothers me is, let's say I had lost a weapon in Afghanistan. He goes, I didn't, but let's say I did. And that weapon, that serial number is still linked to me, and that someday my son or grandson is going to have to go back there and he could be killed by that weapon. And he goes, that bothers me. That keeps me up at night. And I think that's a realistic concern. Speaking of that, I want to talk to you, Dr. Fuller. Says, when I saw Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin activate the Civil Reserve Air Fleet program, I think it was maybe yesterday.
Yeah.
It blew my mind, and it reminded me of like an American Dunkirk. We're asking for 18 aircraft, 3 from American Airlines, Atlas, Delta, etc., 4 from United Airlines, etc. And it reminds me of the 850 boats that sailed for Dunkirk to rescue about 340,000 British and Allied troops to get them out of there. It's a similar debacle in my mind. Am I making too much of that?
No, I can see the similarities. I mean, the biggest difference in my mind is, you know, Dunkirk was the evacuation of military forces. We're pulling in all these civilian aircraft to evacuate civilians. I think there's civilians that we owe a significant debt to because they're interpreters, they're the folks that worked for us and with us for the last 20 years, and, you know, they're as good as dead if we leave them behind. I think that, one, we owe them individually, but we also, from a strategic long-term viewpoint, if you don't take care of our allies now, what's to say that the next time we go into a country and ask people to work for us, that they're going to do it without saying, we saw how you treated your allies in Afghanistan. We did something very similar with the Hmong after Vietnam, right? We evacuated a whole bunch of them because they were working with the SF. What's really stunning to me about this is it just shows us such a lack of planning.
Yeah.
You know, I have to believe that they staffed the withdrawal from Afghanistan to the nines, right? I mean, I have to believe the Pentagon had all kinds of plans for getting everybody out of there. I can't imagine that they would have just ignored the thousands of Afghan nationals that would legitimately have a claim to, you know, hey, U.S., well, you helped you get me out of here. And then the idea that, you know, we're packing hundreds of people into, you know, any C-17 we can get, flying them to Qatar, and then going, oh God, what are we going to do now? That's just mind-boggling to me that we wouldn't already either have military aircraft on standby, we wouldn't already have had chartered aircraft. I mean, how many of us flew on chartered aircraft to get to the Gulf War, right? Yeah.
This guy.
Right. So, you know, this is not something that is outside our experience. And if you're pulling thousands, up to 20,000 people out of a country, you got to have where are we going to put them? I mean, that's one of the first things you ask, right? Where are they going? We're just going to take them to Qatar and say, okay, your problem now? Well, I don't think the folks there are going to be too happy about that. You know, and the fact that we gave Bagram Air Base back in July of, I guess, this year, we gave it back to the Taliban. That was just in my mind. I'm sure there's good information as to why this was done that I'm not privy to, I hope. But Bagram is so much bigger and so much easier to defend than Kabul. It's 25 miles up the road, straight line distance. So it's an easy helicopter flight. We could have gotten people out of Kabul into Bagram. You know, Bagram already had all the defensive positions out there. They had all the standoff in case of car bombs because they had car bombs go off there. So they could have taken some significant steps to get people out through Bagram. And I think it would have been much less confusing. You know, because now look at all the videos we're seeing of these people just packed at the gates, trying to get into the airfield, right? Trying to get into Kabul airport to take advantage of this Dunkirk-esque lift.
Yeah.
And the Taliban is still fighting ISIS-K, right? ISIS-K is over there in Khorasan province. ISIS-Khorasan province. They're having at each other. And, which makes me wonder, okay, the Taliban is the reasonable foe that we have to deal with. So we don't have to deal with, those are the guys we negotiate with. So we don't have to negotiate with ISIS. That's a pretty extreme set of circumstances. But it seems ripe for an ISIS-K attack right there. I mean, a suicide bomber in that batch is going to it's going to be bad for everybody involved. So this, to me, is a mess that didn't have to happen. I mean, it was always going to be messy, let's be honest.
True.
But it's just the fact that we've got to suddenly and out of nowhere call on the civilian air carriers. That surprised me. That really did surprise me.
Yeah, it was disheartening when I saw that, because it reminded me of Dunkirk. And you mentioned briefly about Qatar and their role in this. I saw that the Qatari ambassador was helping smuggle Americans to the airfield to get them out, and I'm like, man, this is not good. Yeah. And we're relying on people like that. What is President Ghani's role in the fall? Does he have any role in this at all, or is he just the guy standing there when it happened? He
was the guy who was standing when the music stopped. What is his role? I mean, obviously, Afghan view on leadership and presidential governance is different from ours. Right? It's a very tribal society. They did have a lot of success when they had a king, but the Russians took care of that, 40 years ago. So Ghani was never considered by anybody to be, a strong central leader, a rallying point for the tribes. So, as soon as things started to go sideways, he hopped a bird and got out of there. Again, not exactly the most inspirational leader. I mean, interestingly enough, Hamid Karzai is still in Kabul, last I heard, with his family. And he's asked the Taliban politely, please don't, execute me. I suppose Ghani couldn't have stuck around. They probably would have shot him just out of, a sense of decorum. But, could he have done better? Absolutely. Is he at fault for this collapse? Probably not. Could he have been more inspirational and more leader-esque? Yeah. But, we have, especially those of us that have served in the military, we have a skewed view of leadership. We got to remember that not everybody sees leadership the way we see leadership. And, we tend to surround ourselves with other military folks. So we all kind of make this echo chamber where we all have the same attitude about leadership. Yeah, okay, this is what one does when one's in charge. But we got to remember that there's only there's like 1 million of us, right? 1.5 million of us in a country of 330 million. Most folks don't see it the way we do. No. And most folks in Afghanistan don't see things the way Americans do. So, you and I and your brother and Lieutenant Colonel Land and all, the other folks here, we look at what's going on over there and we go, what a failure of leadership. Jesus, whoever's in charge of that, where are the NCOs? We have to start asking these questions, right? But the reality is they don't exist. It's not their thing. It's not their shtick. And to discuss that it's like trying to explain a wristwatch to a cat, it's just not in their realm of experience.
That's a good point. That's a great analogy, because it's like, you got to explain time before you can even get to the wristwatch, and you're going to lose the cat already. It's like, I don't even know what that is. Yeah. So, what? One of the things that bothers me is we're handing over one of the most mineral wealthy countries in the world with an estimated $1 trillion of mineral wealth. And China, of course, is eyeing that really hard. And I think they're going to be making moves and have been making moves in the country for some time. And we're just handing that over. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out over the long haul. But I really want to talk to you about, does this current state in Afghanistan, does this embolden terrorists to recreate the safe havens that they once had before 9/11?
I think it will. I don't think it will be as obvious and as in your face as it was pre 9/11. Before 9/11, the Taliban was pretty much the honey badger of the Islamic world, right? They just didn't give a shit. And they would do what they want to do. Well, they just took it on the chin for 20 years. I think that they will be a little bit more circumspect. I don't think we'll see anything coming out of there for 6 months, maybe a year, because they've got to solidify their hold on the country. They've got to establish a government. They've got to turn the water on. They got to turn them. Well, I guess most of that stuff didn't get destroyed, but they've got to get things going the way they want to get things going. Get all the women back in burqas. Get the men growing their beards again. Shoot the guys that need to be shot, et cetera, et cetera. So they're going to be consolidating power for a while. But I think that as soon as they get settled in and a terrorist group shows up and says, look, here's $10 million. We'd like to set up a camp, and we'll be very quiet, and we'll be over here in the corner. We won't bother you. I think they'll be doing that. I think they'll absolutely be doing that again. That's part and parcel of their view, right? They want to export Islam, and doing so at the point of the sword is a tradition going all the way back to Muhammad. So,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and if the Chinese want to roll in there and try to get that mineral wealth out, but it calms them all down and it settles things down, part of me is like, more power to you. I don't think you'll be able to do it. No one has been able to. I mean, it's the death of many an empire in that country, rolling all the way back. I mean, even what's his name? Alexander the Great took 3 years to conquer that place. And then only just the main road so he could drive through or roll through. It's a mess, and trying to impart modern governance on that place, it's just tough. It's absolutely tough.
Yeah. My brother says Taliban just put their name on the back order list for 5.56 from the U.S. ammo dealers. Ha ha ha. Lieutenant Colonel Brothers is on. He says, good, let the PRC have it. Yeah, good luck if they can add their list to the empires that died there. Gordon Botson is on. Good morning, Gordon. Good to have you, sir. One of the things that bothered me when I heard President Biden blaming the Afghan soldier for the failure, I really found that disturbing. 66, anywhere from 66,000 to 69,000 Afghani soldiers and military folks have died over there in the last 20 years. And I just don't understand what a career politician that has never served, that received 5 draft deferments to not serve in Vietnam, has to say about the sacrifices of other people.
If you want me to jump on that bandwagon, I will. I mean, what can you say about this guy? That you're muted, by the way. He's just, yeah. But that's what our politicians do, right? I mean, I'm not trying to make excuses for them. They talk about things they have no freaking earthly idea what they're talking about, and they present themselves as experts, usually with the phrase "the American people" thrown in there somewhere, as though they speak for all of America. Yeah, talking about an Afghan soldier that collapsed. Yeah, did they fall apart? Sure they did. Is that a surprise? It shouldn't be. It absolutely shouldn't be. It's not a surprise to me, and who the hell am I? I'm just some old chubby guy sitting in South Carolina, right? That, 18 years ago was in Afghanistan.
A former action guy is what you
Yes. I was a badass in the 90s. So he's got access to a whole lot more intel than I do. So this shouldn't be a surprise. But blaming the Afghan soldier, the average soldier, that's ridiculous. They, of course, I see the Colonel Land said they threw down their weapons and quit. Absolutely. How is it so surprise? I mean, he's worked with those folks. I've worked with those folks. They're just not American soldiers. I mean, there's a reason we're the 300-pound gorilla. And it's because we are who we are, and have been for 200 years. These people don't have that history. And again, I'm not trying to make excuses for them. I'm not. It's just a simple fact that judging them through the same lens that we judge our soldiers it's a waste of time. I mean, there's 2,500 of our guys on the ground right now, and could the Taliban roll over them at the airport if they tried? Sure. Would they get their nose knocked out of shape in the process? Yes. Would then large portions of Kabul get flattened by the U.S. Air Force? Probably. But would we go back in there and raise hell? Yes. Would the Afghans in the same situation do the same thing? Nope. Just wouldn't.
No. Chad, of course, spent a lot of his younger life. He's now getting long in the tooth like the rest of us. But he says the Taliban aren't much of a threat without support. They'll be helped and propped up with other state sponsors, much like We supported them against the Russians. They weren't much without Al-Qaeda and foreign actors such as Iran. And then he goes on to say Afghans survived. That's what they do. When the Taliban came knocking and said, join us or we'll kill you and rape your family, they survived. Well said, very succinct. And of course, Chad was a special operations civil affairs operator over there in Afghanistan. So we need to probably bring Chad on again to talk about that. One of the articles I saw, Dr. Fuller said that there are more than 100 official and pro-Taliban sites popping up on social media. And I think this is alarming and strange because, of course, Twitter issued the 45th president of the United States a permanent suspension for some mean tweets that he made, and Facebook gave him a 2-year suspension. But the Taliban that have committed some of the most horrific atrocities in the world, including rape and acts of genocide, are welcome and encouraged to be on Twitter. If that doesn't kind of make you scratch your head, I don't know what will.
You're right. I mean, we're giving a bully pulpit to the people that shouldn't have a pulpit at all. And it's one that they could suspend with the flick of a switch. And 5-10 years ago, one of the big problems we were running into was Western girls and women were jumping on planes and flying over there to Syria to join, and marry,
an ISIS fighter,
right? Yeah. And then they got there and found out it wasn't all wine and roses, and then they were trying to reintegrate and come back, and that was a big set of hoops that you had to kind of jump them through. There's no reason to expect that this won't happen again with these guys, and allowing them to have that bully pulpit, it just is mind-boggling to me. But years ago, one of the generals running around, his name escapes me right now, said that America isn't at war. America's at the mall. The American military is at war.
Well said.
And I think that's what we see here now. The American military has been at war for 20 years. There have been no gas shortages until, since November of last year. There have been no, runs on anything other than toilet paper. People are not, planting victory gardens in their backyard. You're just not seeing that. Giving these guys that outlet is something that in a total war situation, you would like to think the government would come down to these different social media platforms and say, kill it. And that these social media platforms, were they actually patriotic, would say, yeah, absolutely. But it's interesting to me how, in some cases they scream, First Amendment, free speech. And in the other cases they scream, extreme speech, we won't have it, we won't support it. So you have private entities making these decisions that the government couldn't. I mean, if this was a government-run organization, there'd be very strict laws and rules and regulations based on the Constitution as to what they could and could not do and say. You don't have, the Constitution doesn't rule Mark Zuckerberg. The Constitution doesn't rule the powers that be at Twitter and Instagram and whatnot. So they make decisions based on dollars and not on the best interests of humanity.
Yeah, George Zimmerman asked, and I don't know if this is the actual George Zimmerman.
It is.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. George, glad to have you on the show, sir. Maybe have to have you on one day. It says, does Dr. Fuller believe there would be a difference in the Afghan withdrawal if the Trump administration's elite military HRT hadn't been dismantled by Biden?
I can't speak to the HRT piece, but I can speak to my opinion as to whether there would be a difference if President Trump was involved. I think there would be. People like to beat up and mock on Trump a lot because of his mean tweets. But the reality is the guy's a businessman, right? He knows what he's doing business-wise. He's made mistakes. He's been in that particular set of circumstances for a long time. So I have to believe that he would say, look, I'm upholding my end of the deal. You're not upholding your end of the deal. So the deal's got to change. I think that just based on personalities alone, there would be a vast difference. Based on relationships with the military, there would be a vast difference. Based on the audience each of those two individuals would be playing to in terms of constituency, there would be a difference. I don't think you would see quite this much of a problem were someone else in that seat, were President Trump in the seat. But I could be wrong. I don't know, but I think there would be a big difference. I really do.
Yeah, I just, that Access Hollywood tape that they leaked of former President Trump having a private conversation a very bawdy conversation, if you will, between him and Billy Bush in 2005, 16 years ago, where he said something about grabbing a woman's genitals on a bus to Billy Bush, and we're going to kick him off Twitter for that, amongst many other things. Whereas the Taliban, go online, folks, and they're putting women in burqas and beating them on the street, raping and killing them. But they have a platform on social media, and again, the First Amendment rights deal with American citizens, as I understand it, not necessarily with the terrorist organizations on the other side of the planet.
It's true.
Yeah, George Zimmerman says, thank you for answering my question. Glad to be here amongst like-minded patriots. Yeah, George, please consider coming on Coffee with the Rich. Love to have you, sir. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, given the current state in Afghanistan, what concerns you most about the situation going on there right now, Dr. Fuller?
Well, I mean, having been there and having had friends that served, friends that lost body parts, friends that didn't come home, like many of your viewers, there's a concern with, what was it all for? Taliban was in charge when we got there. Taliban's in charge when we left. So on a personal level, that's a little bit disconcerting. The way I get through that is I tell myself, look, I did my job. I went over there and I did what I needed to do. I did what was required of me. There are several guys whose careers with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda ended while I was there as a direct result of me having been there, and they will bother no one ever again. And I feel good about that. If other people didn't do their job, that's on them, right? In the long term, I think it's a base for these knuckleheads to set up in, right? I mean, Libya is now a failed state, so they've got that to hang out in. They've got a couple others that are roaming around that have been around for a long time, and I think we're going to see the same thing here. One of the big problems that is Taliban, it won't be a failed state. It'll be an actual state. So they can issue things like passports. They can create diplomatic connections with other countries. Ergo, they can have a diplomatic pouch that they can send back and forth to other countries. And these are not folks that think like we do. I mean, they just don't, not only do they not think like we do, they're not even in the same century we're in.
That's right.
And, they're acting as though, and they comport themselves as though, and their dogma and their doctrine is as if this was 1300, 1400. And it's not. It's just not. I mean, I've watched the videos when I was over there of, you were involved in adultery. They took you out to the soccer field and they stoned you to death. That's a rough way to go. It is a rough way to die. And they thought that was okay.
Yeah.
This is how they're going to comport themselves. And I am concerned that their success will embolden others that are like-minded, and it will give others a place to jump through and to launch from. That's a concern. And again, as you pointed out, I've got a young son, I've got a young daughter. Do I want them to end up over there? God, I hope not. I'd much rather they be shepherds and poets and, not be doing that silliness, but it's a possibility. Or, they export their terrorism and it comes here. Those are my long-term concerns. So,
Chad raises the question, Dr. Fuller. It's just, if you've looked into it, talk about the Afghanistan opium trade and maybe your thoughts on the role the military played in trying to squash some of that.
When I was there, and I don't know what years Chad was there, but when I was there, British SAS, that was pretty much their entire mission. They weren't chasing Taliban or Al-Qaeda so much as they were wiping out poppy fields. I've got a real good picture of me standing with poppy fields behind me, and they're not in bloom, but it's green, right? Which was weird. It's outside of Kandahar, and it's just acres of poppy fields, acres and acres and acres. And 2 days after we were there, the whole thing mysteriously burst into flames. It was the weirdest thing. There's so much poppy being grown there, and there was part of the civil affairs guys would go and try to get them to change crops. Say, look, stop growing poppy and grow onions, and grow turnips, grow food. Well, okay, I can get 10 cents an acre for growing onions, or I can get $500 an acre for growing poppy.
Yeah.
Basic math, even for an Afghan peasant, is pretty considerable. While I was there, I remember SAS called an airstrike on like a 13 or 14 truck convoy full of poppy. And they just whacked it. They whacked the whole thing. Almost got into a firefight one day. We went to a training base, a Taliban training base outside of Kandahar, and we pulled up, and I got a picture of myself actually in bin Laden's house that they dropped 2 Mark 84s through the roof right after the war started. Mark 84 is a wonderful remodeling tool, by the way.
Yeah.
But we pulled up to this compound because we need to get some evidence out of there for a federal case. But the poppy guys had moved in. The drug guys had moved in. And they didn't want to let us in. So there was some debate as to whether we were going to get in. So that was on the one side, us saying, oh, no, we're coming in. On the other side, them saying, oh, no, you're not coming in. And what ended up settling the debate was there were 2 Apaches in the area. We got them on the horn, and they flew over and started doing laps around the compound. And they were like, why don't you guys come on in? So, Mark 80, AH-64 door key. But the poppy trade is not going to go away over there. And I think the Taliban is going to realize very quickly that's a source of hard currency, and they're going to at least turn a blind eye to it. And it's going to continue. It's going to absolutely continue.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, Dr. Fuller. Will ask, speaking of open borders and not vetting folks coming in from any means, can you address that? And I think that, if I can't imagine that everybody that's jumping on those C-17s racing out of Kabul are fully vetted. I could be wrong.
I think you're right. I think you're right. But here's what kills me about that. There's 20,000, 15,000. Those are the numbers I've seen thrown around of people that are trying to get out, including family members. And they're all being forced to go through some level of vetting process, if not in Afghanistan, then certainly when they get to the next place, right? Whether it's Germany or Qatar or wherever it ends up being. Meanwhile, in Texas, you come across the border and you're not being vetted at all. You're being, they're not even checking you for COVID, right? Because heaven forfend. They give you a court date, which of course you immediately blow off and cut you loose. So you've got literally thousands and thousands of folks coming across our southern border under one set of policies, and folks coming across from Afghanistan that have a much better claim on having been at least moderately helpful to the United States. Whether they actually are or not is pretty simple to figure out. And they're being put through a ringer. Nobody in Guatemala is dragging these folks out and shooting them in the back of the head. But these folks in Afghanistan, that's a very real fear for them. So the motivations for coming across the border are vastly different. And the treatment at the hands of the U.S. government is vastly different. And I think that's worthy of note.
No, it is most definitely worthy of note. My brother sent me this article this morning, TC, and one of the things that was in it says the Taliban have quote, broken the shackles of slavery, said Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan. He said, quote, it is harder to throw off the chains of cultural enslavement. What is happening in Afghanistan now? They have broken the shackles of slavery, end quote. Once again, so this is the Prime Minister of Pakistan at one point. Pakistan, of course, an ally during the global war on terror for a while, perhaps not now, and is now saying this is an awesome thing going on in Afghanistan. So again, to your point from earlier in today's show, they have a lot of support coming from neighbors, and I really can't understand that. Perhaps you can shed some light on it for us.
Well, the Pakistanis have long supported these guys. In the tribal areas in northern Pakistan, there's just almost no governmental presence. Let me back up. When I was with Bagram and Jalalabad and Kandahar, we would occasionally take rocket attacks. And what these guys would do is they'd throw down a piece of plywood, put a few rockets on it, hook a battery up to it and a timer, and beat feet. So they weren't there for the inevitable counter battery fire when the rockets launched. But launching a rocket off of a piece of plywood is not the most accurate means of delivery. So sometimes they would hit the base, sometimes they would fly over the base, sometimes they would fly short, sometimes they'd, skip across the ground and do whatever. The only time I took accurate directed indirect fire was out of the tribal areas in Pakistan into base. I was there with the Ranger Battalion. We were taking accurate fire from them because they were on the launchers. The rockets were in their appropriate launchers from the Pakistanis. The Pakistanis, when I was there, were well known for leaking like a sieve. Any information you gave to the Pakis went right to the Taliban. And you could trace it, you could track it. And let's face it, where was bin Laden? Right? Where was he hiding?
Pakistan.
Right. And where in Pakistan, right? Like spitting distance from their version of West Point.
That's right.
For years, but nobody knew he was there.
Nah.
So the idea that Pakistan is any kind of an ally of ours is, laughable in my mind. Now, maybe they've changed. I don't know. Maybe they've repented their erroneous ways. But when the Taliban was fighting the Russians, we've funneled a lot of money through the Pakis into their hands. A lot of training came from the Pakistanis for them. The problem is, of course, is that the Pakistanis see a lot of overlap between their worldview and the Taliban's worldview. And the Taliban is willing to do things that the Pakistanis can't necessarily get away with, so they can use them as a stand-in, for their fights. So there are advantages for the Pakistanis to having a Taliban government in Afghanistan.
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Fuller, as we wind down on our time together this morning, I don't know, you have an appointment at 9. I want to be respectful of your time. I want to ask you basically 2 final questions. One, if you could look at what's going on in Afghanistan right now through the lens of those that wish us harm, perhaps China, perhaps Russia, perhaps someone else. How are they receiving this information?
It's got to make them happy, right? I mean, we're taking a big black eye, getting out of there. It's really been a national embarrassment the way things have been handled. I think it's fodder for nation state actors to use in their own propaganda campaigns against us. I think that if they're running any kind of information warfare on us, it's a bonanza in terms of what's happened and what they can do with that information. It's a windfall of American military equipment and for whatever they want to use that for. And again, it's just a national embarrassment. I mean, this is going to be one that we're going to talk about in the same breath with Bay of Pigs. We're going to talk about it in the same breath with the fall of Saigon. The fall of Kabul has just not been well handled. It just hasn't. And that has got to make other people happy. And, of course, the Russians have got to feel at least slightly vindicated that they went in there and got their ass handed to them. And then we thought we'd go in there and take care of business, and we got our ass handed to them. Or handed to us. So I think that it's all good news for our opponents. The only downside is, like Nixon said, you won't have me to kick around anymore. You won't have American soldiers quite so easy to kill, there in Afghanistan.
When it comes to our friends, which is the next question I want to talk to you about, how are our allies perceiving this? But before I talk about that, it reminds me of a story that you mentioned the Vietnamese at the fall of Saigon, some of our friends that we were able to get out that assisted us. And it reminds me of a story my father told me. There was a Vietnamese that worked for him. And he said, when I was a little boy, I remember running around the streets of Saigon carrying 2-gallon buckets of paint that the CIA gave to us. And he's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, they said when and if Saigon falls, you get up to the highest rooftop you can, open these paint, and it was a certain color paint, and just splash it on the rooftop, and the helos will come by and pick you and your family up. And I thought that was a pretty interesting low-cost solution to try to get out some of the people that work closely with the agency over there. And I wonder if things like that are probably happening as we speak, I would imagine.
Sure. I've actually heard people talk about the digital Dunkirk, where they're, people are helping folks get out via social media and what have you. But you mentioned paint, and I'm reminded of a story with real quick. Oh my gosh, it disappeared on me there for a second. When I was in country, I was out at a special forces compound. I was talking to the medic, getting a blowout kit, right? The big medical kit that I was going to wear on my chest. And while I was talking to him, 2 of their Afghan local employees came in, and one of them's leading the other one. The one's his eyes are just beet red. And he goes on. The medic tells me, "Excuse me, I got to deal with this." I'm like, "Hey, no problem." So I sit down, I'm watching, and the one guy with the red eyes, he can't speak English, and he's talking to the second guy, and that guy's interpreting. And the medic, of course, asks him, what the hell happened to you? And the interpreter says, well, he got paint in his eye. He was outside painting the building, and he got a drop of paint in his eye. And the medic's like, paint in his eye? Well, that didn't cause this. He says, no. The problem was he got paint in his eye. He wanted to get it out, and he was using gasoline to thin the paint, and he knew that would get the paint off his brush. So he just poured gasoline in his eyes to get it out. And of course, I'm in the corner. Now I start laughing hysterically. And I recommend that perhaps he should take 2 aspirin and not smoke for 24 hours. And the medic's trying to keep a straight face and deal with this guy. But it goes to what we were talking about earlier. The world views and the education levels are just miles apart. And so for us to kind of judge from where we sit on the way they're doing things, it's really got to be done with a healthy dose of salt. So, anyhow, neither here nor there.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It reminds me, one of it might have been a CNN crew, and they have a written letter from the local Taliban commander saying that they can gain access to this area. And of course, the Taliban man the checkpoint, none of them can read it. Right. None of them are literate. So that letter doesn't mean anything. They don't respect it. Sure. So that goes incredibly well to your point. So now let's talk, TC, in the final moments we have together this morning. What does this mean for, specifically, I want to go back to the question I asked you as far as how our enemies are perceiving this. And you said they got to be enjoying it. But specifically, let's talk Taiwan.
Oh, God.
What is it? What is this?
If I'm China, I'm thinking, you know what, I'm going to make some more islands out in the South China Sea, right? Taiwan. And the good news for the Taiwanese is they're not the Afghans, right? That is a much different can of worms in Taiwan. You've got a different populace. You've got a better educated populace. You've got a very dedicated to their freedoms populace. This is not a populace that's going to throw their arms down and surrender in mass like the Afghans did. Right. But they've also got to be nervous. And the Chinese have got to be emboldened because they see, American political will is on display here. Now, this wasn't a sudden surrender. Like the Americans didn't just suddenly go, you know what, we're out. This has been ongoing for years, right? We've been doing this for a while across 2 administrations, one Republican, one Democrat. So I think it shows a weakening, perhaps. It could be perceived as a weakening of American will, but not an abdication of all of our responsibilities. And, our dedication to Taiwan is much, much different than our dedication to Afghanistan. Afghanistan falls, it doesn't threaten our shipping lanes. It doesn't threaten our commerce. It doesn't threaten American dominance in the Pacific. Taiwan falls, it's another animal. It's a whole nother animal. And if we simply allow Taiwan to fall, if the Chinese decide to attack, which I don't think they would, but if they did decide to attack, and we did not support them, well, now that's going to send a message to the Brits and the French, and it's going to send a message to our serious allies that, hey, maybe they need to look elsewhere for a big, strong buddy. So yeah, if I was the Chinese, I'd maybe be raising an eyebrow about this, and looking hard at what they could probably get away with in the South China Sea. I don't know that this is a signal to the Chinese to go ahead and jump on top of Taiwan and do a land invasion.
What if it's? I can't imagine a better time if they ever were thinking about taking it. Is now, and maybe it's not a hard invasion, but maybe it's a soft invasion,
or maybe start maybe a couple little islands here and there, right? Maybe not Taiwan, but nobody said boo about a lot of things lately. And one of them is the Chinese just building islands in the South China Sea. We shouldn't be allowing that. That should not be acceptable. And it's been going on long enough now that, at first they said, well, we're not going to militarize them. We're not going to put air bases on them. Well, of course, that was, a load of crap. And as soon as they got the islands big enough, that's exactly what they did. But now it's too late. You can't sink the island, right? There's nothing you can do about it now. And so now China has air bases where they shouldn't. That's a problem. So does this embolden them to maybe grab an island, an archipelago here and there? Yeah, probably. We're a little busy right now. And it's clear that the Biden administration does not want to get itself into any kind of a shooting war. we seem to have this national fear of the word unilateral that's been growing for the last 30 years. And I think it's rampant in one side of our two-party system.
Matt asked a really good question, Dr. Fuller. He says, can you speak to the current state of affairs in Israel and how our Afghanistan pullout will affect our relationship with them, perhaps our world affairs relative to Israel?
Well, I think I used to live in the Sinai Desert, so I spent quite a bit of time in Israel, been all over that place. They have a national will we can only aspire to. I mean,
Yes.
the Israelis decide that something needs to be done in their national interest, and they simply do it. And if nobody likes it, screw you. They don't care. The international honey badgers. But they, I think we're setting them up for, a little bit more problems. The good news is, Afghanistan doesn't share border with them. And, people don't want to talk about it, but Israel has normalized relationships with a couple of countries thanks to the past administration that they didn't have before, right? I mean, there are countries now that were at war with the Israelis for the last 50 years that are no longer at war with them. And they've started to extend olive branches in that part of the world. So I think that's good for the Israelis. I think a more virulent form of Islam taking over anywhere in the world is bad for the Israelis. But I don't think the Taliban is going to be up to the task of going after Israel anytime soon, because Israel, simply cannot invade Afghanistan, but they sure as hell can bomb the crap out of it. And I don't think that it would bother them at all to go there and kill a few people that need killing and drop some bombs and put some warheads on some foreheads. And I think you'd have to be completely ignorant of international affairs to be in the Taliban government and think, hey, let's go screw with Israel right now. A year from now, 5 years from now, maybe.
Yeah, I guess what bothers me about that is its close ties to Pakistan. And Pakistan, of course, is a nuclear armed nation. And if Israel did, it could definitely draw in Pakistan and, of course, India. And we could see that entire region just descend into a fiery cloud.
Yeah, certainly it's a possibility. And you got to be concerned when you have some of these more wobbly states that are nuclear armed. I think even the most extreme people in Pakistan have got to realize, look, if we give a nuke of any size to these knuckleheads in the Taliban, first thing that will happen is they'll slip the leash on India, and India will just crush them. And pretty much the whole civilized world will be like, no, that's not cool. And Pakistan will cease to exist as a nation. And I think they realize that. I don't think they want to get into it. It's one thing to have nukes. It's a whole other animal to use them, right? Having the nuke gets you a seat at the big boy table. Using one gets you, international pariah status. I like to think, but the problem is you just, again, as I've said several times, a lot of the people in that part of the world just don't think like we do. They simply don't. And that makes it very difficult to predict what they're going to do.
Yeah. The last question, Dr. Fuller, is about how our allies perceive this debacle going on in Afghanistan. What are your thoughts on that, sir?
I think our allies have had a real hard time over the last 10 years of just dealing with the United States. This has got to be one of those things where they look at us and go, you're supposed to be the big bad. You're supposed to have it together. And this is you having it together. This is, not only from a military perspective, but from a governmental perspective. We don't seem to have our government and our spokespeople don't seem to have their act together. I mean, the Pentagon spokesman came out and said Kabul is safe. It's under no threat. It's under no imminent danger. And 2 days later, it falls to the Taliban. That again looks bad. It looks like our government maybe just doesn't know what the hell it's doing. Maybe it doesn't have absolute control over things. I liken it to, when you were a kid, right? You looked at adults and said, oh man, they've got it all together, right? They've got it all wrapped up. They know all the answers. They've got everything going. And then you become an adult and you realize they were just best guessing it, right? So I think that, some of our allies might be having that best guessing it moment, right? They might be looking at us going, Jesus, dude. The good news for us is the allies that we have that are over there are going through the exact same thing right now. I mean, the Brits are having the same problem. It's just they don't have as big a footprint as we do. The French, they're all trying to get out, and it's not going well for anybody. And part of that it falls right on the Afghans. They fell apart too quick. They fell apart faster than anybody could predict. or anybody did predict. I think it could have been predicted. It just didn't.
Yeah, I saw that the French were using one of their some counter-terrorist raid force going around the city and pulling their people out that way. And of course, they have a much smaller footprint than we do. I get it, but for us to say, yeah, we're going to rely on the good graces of the Taliban to let our people through checkpoints, to me it's a recipe for a problem. But
right,
and
let's say those, a family of 5 hits a checkpoint, American checkpoint, and the Taliban said, yeah, you can get through, and they don't, and the Taliban disappears them. Are we going to go back to war over those 5 people that just vanish? Are we going to say, whoa, stop everything? Put the first Mardiv back in there. Where's the 82nd Airborne? Get them in there.
Right.
Is that going to happen? No, it's not. I mean, it's sad to say, but it's not. And, I see the president come on there and say, we will get all Americans out. I'm like, no, you won't. You won't. You might want to. I don't doubt the sincerity of wanting to get them out. I don't doubt for a moment that the military guys will try like hell to get every American out of there. But you're not going to get them all out. And to say otherwise is ignoring real politics. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't know. When I saw the people trying to climb on board C-17s and then falling to their death trying to escape the country, I'm like, why are we not putting a Ranger battalion in there to seize that airfield and bring some order and stability to it? I didn't understand that then, and I really don't understand it now. We have the forces and the capabilities to do something like that in a matter of a few days. Why have we not taken that step to secure at least that airfield and that one way out? Because if we lose it, we're going to have a nightmare beyond what we can appreciate right now.
It also, those images that you just mentioned underscore the fact that this is a place people want to get to. I mean, people will literally die trying to get to the United States. I remember I was in Gitmo. We had a fence line shooting where a guy had walked from Havana all the way down to Guantanamo Bay, which, if you know the geography of the country, that's a significant distance. And he made it all the way to within a few hundred yards of the American military installation when he was detected by the border guards, and he took off running, and he made it to the fence before they machine gunned him, and he died. People in this country, I think, take for granted what we have, and it's incidents like these that really underscore how desirable it is to live in this country that we all take for granted far too often. That people will literally cling to the outside of an aircraft that's going to fly, 35, 40,000 feet in the air in the hopes that they might survive to get out and get to the United States.
And they found dead bodies in the wheel well of that
right.
aircraft. I mean, it's just absolutely horrific.
Right. And you've got the infant being handed over the wall, just needed medical treatment, but still, what does it take? What would it take for you to take, Grant when he was that big, to hand him to some military guy on the other side of a barbed wire fence? It just for the hope that he would receive the medical treatment he needs.
And then to that point, that's an amazing point to put it into the micro, to look at it through that lens. And, over the weekend, the Summer of Love continued in Portland as Antifa went at it with the Proud Boys, and there was gunfire. And it's like, guys, I'm confused, Dr. Flynn. I know I've only got a couple minutes left with you, sir. Final thoughts as we wrap up the show today.
I think that it is taking up a lot of our bandwidth right now. It's absolute pandemonium. It's a mess. It is not appear to be being run with the level of precision and planning that we would like to think. But it's also a great distraction, right? I mean, when was the last time you heard anything about riots? What riots? I don't know anything about riots. It is giving the Washington Post something to write about, to spin how great a job the president's doing. It's funny watching them turn into a complete property, like abandon any sense of objectivity in this rush to spin things. It's a mess. I think we've been dealing with a lot of messes for the last several years. It's just our latest one. And as long as we still have, bread and fishes or bread and circuses, right? As long as we still have food on the shelves and Netflix works, I guess the rest of us won't matter too much. Won't bother. But you'd be silly not to pay attention.
Yeah, that's true. But pay attention to that, because I think it's going to shape our country and our country's place in the world for years to come, I'm afraid. Chad said, Rich, don't forget TC has an appointment. The proctologist is waiting. Well said, sir. Okay.
Don't judge.
Yeah,
One must become colon conscious when you get to a certain age.
that's very true. Dr. Fuller, thank you so much for being on the show today, sir.
Thank you for having me, Rich. It's always a pleasure. I always enjoy interacting with you and your viewers. Thank you very much for inviting me back on the show.
Thank you. Thank you to the 33 folks that are still watching this morning. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you to everyone that will listen in the podcast in the days and weeks to come or watch on the YouTube channel, Coffee with Rich. Thank you so much, guys, for being on. And remember, the fight is coming. Be ready.